Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
You're listening to Tony Graham on Binjang 91.5, and from Studio 2, I'm talking with the Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council. That's Matthew Dickerson. Hello, Matthew.
Good morning, Tony. Thanks for chatting to me again. It's always good to be able to give your listeners an update on what happened at the latest council meeting.
Yeah, and as you know, it's really important for Wellington people to know what's happening with what council's doing, because there is some very serious matters that are currently being addressed in and around roads and infrastructure in particular. And I'm sure everybody wants to know where we are up to with that. So we'll start with the acquisition of Crown land for public road upgrade of the Gilmer Road and 12 Mile Road intersection. This has been a subject that's been running for many, many years now. So what's happening with that?
So this is really just a bit of an administrative tidy-up. There was an agreement in place previously with the last council to acquire a part of the land around there. Now, this is a net zero result in terms of financial result for council. The road has to be, the consent that was given to the Ungala Wind Farm, the road has to be upgraded at that intersection. And we actually met with some people around that area just last week and looked at that intersection there, and basically everyone is aware of the fact that intersection needs to be upgraded, and the proponent is aware of that fact that it needs to be upgraded, but they need some of that road to be acquired, obviously, for that to actually happen. So there was an agreement in place to acquire some of that land, but it wasn't quite right in terms of the parcel of land that was required and just the shape of that parcel in conjunction with the other land that's around there, around the correctional centre. So basically this was just a tidy up to go through that process and change the area that was being acquired by council and fix up the details on that. So again, it will still be at zero cost to council. The Ungala Wind Farm will pay council the money that needs to be paid for that, and then we'll acquire that Crown land there, and essentially that will all be ready to go then for the upgrade. It's probably some time away still, and the residents that live out near there, where we met with them last week and went through that process, their frustration was that there's been talk about this whole wind farm for a long time and nothing's really happened, and there's still a fair bit of planning to go through. The frustration for us, Tony, from a council perspective, is that, of course, we're not the consent authority. We don't get to say yes or no to any of it, but obviously people in the community turn to us to look for answers. So from the best knowledge and information we've got at the moment, we think that Ungala Wind Farm will probably be a little bit over a year away before it starts, for all those road works that are required to be done before that can actually start. This was just one of those administrative steps along the way to enable all of those road works to occur. Okay.
And there was a report last night at the ordinary meeting of council, which this time was, of course, in Dubbo. There was an erosion report update for the Bell River and the Duke of Wellington Bridge and Pioneer Park. So that was an all-in-one report about these important subjects. People want to know what's happening to those things. So what's the latest on that?
So a couple of things. I'll deal with both of them separately, Tony. Pioneer Park, obviously anyone that's been down there, and Pioneer Park, and I've been down there to have a look at it as well, some significant erosion, in particular on the west side of Pioneer Park. And I went along and had a walk along there, and there's tree roots exposed. It's obviously a lot of damage being done there. Now, one of the things that we could do is we could just put it back to how it was, but you'll have another high flow flood event at some stage in the near future, and it would be silly to put it back to the way it was, because you would just end up with the same situation we've got now and then more expense to go and repair that. So what we're proposing to do is change a little bit of that structure around there, and we haven't got the final plan yet. We're working with Soil Conservation Service, but we've got an estimation of some of those costs. We think it'll be somewhere in the vicinity of $1.2, maybe $1.3 million to do the sort of repair work that we believe needs to be done, again in consultation with Soil Conservation Service, to get it to the point where it will basically be able to handle the next high flow flood event. And that'll change a little bit of the way that park will be used. We've had some consultation or some discussions with some of the users of that park, in particular soccer users of that park so far, but we'll have some more consultation around there. And so really that's a long-term solution that we're trying to put in place there. We're getting that money from different parts, so you do actually get $1 million from the state government to recover from an emergency like we've had, but that $1 million has got to be spread around all the various recreational facilities that were damaged in that flood event. So you don't get all the money back that it costs to recover those. So we've got a little bit of money towards it from council's coffers, if you like. $295,000 came from rates and general revenue. We've also got $300,000 from the Disaster Risk Reduction Fund, and then the rest will come from that emergency funding that I mentioned before. So essentially you'll get some repairs done around there. Now, the more interesting one, of course, Tony, is the Duke of Wellington Bridge. Now, we know we've had the discussion before. The Soil Conservation Service gave council a report back in 2018 to make some recommendations around shoring up the riverbank before the Duke of Wellington Bridge as the Bell River flowed down. Council had a workshop about that in 2019, but councillors of the day in their infinite wisdom decided to do nothing with that information. And unfortunately, just as that report predicted, that riverbank has now been eroded to the point where you can't access the Duke of Wellington Bridge. There were 4 proposed options that were put forward by staff for councillors to make a decision on, and of course other options were available if councillors wanted to come up with them as well. So one option was to do absolutely nothing, just leave the riverbank the way it is, leave the bridge the way it is, and do nothing and walk away and cross our fingers and hope everything will be okay. Didn't sound like a great option, but that's certainly one of the options. Another option was decommission that bridge. So basically the whole idea there would be to remove the structure, do some stabilisation works around that riverbank, but basically get rid of that bridge altogether. The other option, or one other option, was to decommission that bridge but retain the structure, so basically leave the bridge there and just stabilise some of the works. And the last option was to reinstate the bridge to its former glory and basically put the roadworks back in there, or put the riverbank back together and have that road that still goes down there. Another option that was a subset of that option was really to do something similar to that, but do it in a way that that bridge could be used as a pedestrian bridge, not strong enough for cars to go on the approach, but do that as a pedestrian bridge. So a fair bit of discussion around the different options there, Tony. But in the end, there's a few things there. One is a structural assessment, just to get some engineers in, just to make sure that bridge is structurally sound. There's no point doing all this work to restore the riverbank if you find that then that bridge has been damaged to the point that it can't handle cars going on it again. So essentially what councillors decided last night was to do the structural assessment, make sure the bridge is strong enough, and then get some pricing on the 2 options there of either decommissioning the bridge, removing the structure altogether and just stabilising the riverbank, or restoring it back to how it was before in terms of that riverbank and having cars go across it again. Without the fairly accurate costings, and again we'll use Soil Conservation Service to do that, without those fairly accurate costings, we don't think councillors are in a position to make any decision, because you don't want to have an open cheque that you give someone to go and restore that. You've got to have some sort of financial costings first. So we'll do those costings and then again take those through a council meeting before we make a final decision.
Okay. Was there any consideration given to the impact on traffic along Monteviers Road, particularly with the development of the Monteviers estate, which continues to grow, and the current impact it's having on the local commute? Has there been any consideration given to that in relation to that bridge? Yeah,
certainly. One of the things that was talked about was how much traffic used to use that bridge, and we obviously can't put a traffic counter on there now because people can't use it, but trying to look at some of those traffic numbers to see if we've got any records there of any traffic numbers, just to get an idea of the traffic impact if we did go down that option of decommissioning that bridge or using it for a pedestrian bridge only. So that's all will be part of that decision-making process once we get some of those final costings. But that was certainly part of the discussion, and how many people used to use that bridge and how many people would continue to use it in the future if we restored it to how it was operating.
So the progress now at Kumabella, I know that there is progress being made. So has there been any changes since the last time we spoke on that?
No, that's still progressing. We have received permission from Fisheries to leave the temporary crossing, the one that some of the farmers, some of the local residents put in beside the existing concrete causeway, which is obviously in a very poor state. So that temporary crossing that's there, and I was out there when we had the meeting at Combella Hall, and I went and had a drive through it and had a look there and watched some vehicles go through it there. And it is a fairly precarious crossing there, so people do need to take care of that. Again, it's not an official council crossing, but Fisheries have allowed that to stay there, and then we can proceed with basically doing the planning for the proper bridge that we'll construct there. We're hoping to have that proper bridge up and running on that, so it won't be a causeway, it'll be a bridge, hoping to have that finished within 12 months, but in that time frame you'll still be able to use the temporary crossing that's there. So that's a permission that has got a timeline on it from Fisheries, but again, we are aiming to get that bridge finished in that time frame.
Okay. And another thing that was approved, but we haven't seen anything happen yet, and that is to do in Cameron Park with the proposed child safety fence going around the children's playground right next to the pedestrian crossing there in Nanama Crescent. So what's happened with that?
Nothing at the moment, and it's an interesting one. I went back and looked at the council resolution before I was on council. They resolved to put some money aside for a fence around that particular playground, but it also talked about putting some money aside after some community consultation. So we need to undertake some formal community consultation. I've certainly had some informal consultation, but that's not good enough. And the opinions I've heard so far have been a bit divided on that. Some people like the idea of having a fence around that. You can put kids in there and basically sit down and have a coffee and know that they're going to be safe in there and not run out onto the highway there. And other people have said that they don't like the idea of a fence. They like to be able to have that open area there where people and children can come in and out of that area. So there certainly needs to be some formal consultation done on that before any works are undertaken there. I don't have a timeline on any formal consultation to be undertaken there.
Yeah, most people I talk to would agree that the problem is that with the playground being relocated to where it is, excuse me, putting a fence around it in that position would not be very good for the amenity of the park. But on the other hand, it's really needed from a safety point of view. So you have this conflict of the playground being put in a place where it's compromised the safety situation. And potentially the amenity as well. There's not going to be any winners with this.
Well, that's right. And sometimes you've just got to come up with a compromise that's going to be as workable as possible for as many people as possible. And that's where we need to do that consultation and get to a final decision on that. I don't like to leave things hanging, Tony. I like to make decisions and just move on with things. And again, sometimes some decisions are tough decisions because you know that some people are going to be disappointed about those decisions. But that's why we're in these positions. We're in these positions to make decisions and move the community forward.
Yeah. And one of the problems too in relation to safety is when you have, excuse me, when you have playgroups that come under organisations that want to use the park for that purpose, they can't do that anymore because it doesn't meet the safety standards required for the insurance for those playgroups to go to an unfenced area so close to a roadway and so close to a river. So that's the conundrum. It definitely has locked out part of the community going to that park.
Yeah, and these are all the things we've got to consider in that consultation, hence my desire to have full community consultation on any project there.
Yeah. Okay, Matthew, was there anything else that came out of the meeting that you'd like to talk about?
Probably the regional and local roads repair program would be one worth noting. So that was the $5 million, just over $5 million that Dubbo Regional Council was allocated out of the state government funds when they announced the $280 million for country roads for country councils. So we had to make a decision about where that money would be spent and what roads were given the priority on that. Obviously, it's a tough one because you've got a lot of roads, and our estimation at the moment is that we'd need about $65 million to get all the roads to a reasonable standard, and that's not a comprehensive report, that's an estimation. So $5 million is nice. Obviously, it's a small amount compared to what we really need there, but we had to make some tough decisions about where that money would go. So Council last night resolved to allocate money, and I'll give you some of the amounts on a few different parts of it there. Saxa Road, $1.3 million was allocated to do various heavy patching along Saxa Road. That won't fix all Saxa Road's problems, but it'll certainly fix some of those problems along there. You've got Bennelong Road, $1.2 million, Burrendong Way, $1 million, Renshaw McGurr Way, $720,000. You've got other smaller amounts, Dripstone Road, Obley Road, Colloi Road, Mogragai Road. So you've got a number of roads there. We've already spent about $200,000 on doing some of the heavy patching work already, but with those amounts there that I've just mentioned and the $200,000 we've already spent, that takes you just over that $5 million that we've been allocated there. And certainly there was some debate about that. There were people who had been making comments about various roads that they wanted to see funds on. There was an amendment moved at the council meeting to take some money away from Saxa Road and put it towards Boundary Road in Dubbo. That amendment was ultimately lost at the council meeting, but it gives you an indication of just how many areas, and part of that argument was that there's probably another 20 or 30 areas that we could say, let's put those in there and remove money from other areas there. Bottom line is, it's a nice amount of money, but it's just not enough to fix all the problems we've got. But that's where we've allocated the funding at this stage.
Okay. All right, Matthew, thank you for your time today.
Always my pleasure, Tony. Always happy to talk to you, and hopefully your listeners get value out of hearing about what's happening at council.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. And we've been listening to the Council Talk with Matthew Dickerson, the Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council, and with myself, Tony Graham, on Binjang 91.5.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.